All right, you primitive screwheads, listen up.
They're coming to get you, Barbara.
I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
Here's Johnny.
Vanity. Definitely my favorite sin.
I am the devil, and I am here to do the devil's work.
The power of Christ compels you.
This is my boomstick.
What's your favorite scary movie?
Hello, horror heads, and welcome to Shiver, a horror movie podcast. We are your hosts. I'm Daniel DeBona.
And I'm David Ulloa.
And boy, do we have one that we drug up out of the depths of obscurity this week through a very circuitous round of logic that I don't care to take you guys on that adventure. I came across this movie called Antrum, and it was something I'd never even heard of before. And I started reading into it a little bit. And I was like, okay, well, that sounds really interesting. And we were kind of trying to fill up the calendar, and we decided to go with it. So if you are coming into this and you are 24 hours off watching it like we are, then come along for the ride, because Antrum is something. What we get from the movie Antrum is it starts off as a documentary about the deadliest film ever made, a movie called Antrum. So we have two Antrums. We have Antrum, the deadliest film ever made, the documentary that we're watching, and we have the movie Antrum that's sandwiched into the middle of these two pieces of documentary. There's a lot of layers that we get in this, and they start off interviewing filmmakers, talking about how this movie was created, and the first time they showed it, the theater came on fire. People die every time they see it. But they got a hold of one of, if not the last copies in the world. And then you get out, then they show you the movie. And it was strange the way it all went down.
That's one way of wording it.
Yeah. it was a definitely an interesting and decently unique take on this idea of found footage, of horror documentary, of all of these things. And so I'm going to start off because it's really easy to get lost in all of that and to forget the one simple question that we always want to start off with, which is, as we jump through all of these hoops to get to the movie Antrum, is this movie scary?
I think it is. It's kind of weird to describe it as scary because I don't think anything scary happens in the movie.
Correct.
What I would describe it as is disturbing.
Yes.
Right from the beginning, they kind of establish that they're using video language, film language to affect the viewer.
Yes.
The way that the film reel moves, the speed at which it moves, the direction that it's moving in, all of that is weird.
Yeah,
it's weird. It's not shot in a native speed. I don't know what exactly it is that they're doing, but there's a lot of tricks that these two filmmakers used to put you on edge. So there's nothing that I think is actually scary here. So it's not like there's a killer that's chasing these people. There is a one small portion of the movie that has to do with cannibals,
right,
which kind of comes out of nowhere, as everything in this movie does.
It doesn't come out of nowhere though, and I'll get to that.
Oh, okay. Daniel's Cult Corner coming at you soon. I did feel uneasy watching this movie, which was the purpose of this movie. To me, the movie, in reading about it, seemed almost like an experiment in horror film making.
Right.
So it's more like a concept film than it is a a narrative, which they kind of frame it within this mockumentary style, which to me was baffling because mockumentaries tend to be very comedic.
Yeah, like, and that's the thing. Like, I keep wanting to refer to it as like a pseudo documentary because I feel like when you use that word mockumentary and you get mock at the beginning, it sounds like you're doing something satirical. When this is just it's a
fake documentary.
It's a fake documentary. It's a pseudo documentary. I think fits better than mockumentary because I agree.
Yeah, but like by definition, it is a mockumentary.
Yes.
You know, so it's weird for it to be something that isn't at all funny. You know,
No.
there's a couple of moments where there was where there was humor, but it was just that. It was like moments of humor. It was definitely not a funny movie.
No.
And I think that's okay because that's not what they were going for. I still haven't decided if it was a good movie.
Fair.
I still haven't decided whether I liked it or not, which is weird because we have to give a rating to this at the end.
You got 90 minutes.
Yeah, that'll come to me. But I have decided, and actually the decision was made for me because it was very effective at this. It did move me in a way. It compelled me to keep watching because I was constantly on the edge of my seat, not knowing what was going to happen next because everything seemed to be kind of just thrown at you. It was almost like a fever dream.
Yeah.
I don't know that the documentary angle really works. It seems kind of shoehorned in there. The beginning kind of works and it sets everything up. The last part to me, I don't know. I feel like it was just thrown in there. Yeah. But I think overall, this is definitely a movie that I would recommend to certain people. It's weird because normally movies like this, I'm like, yeah, you know, it's such a niche thing. I can't imagine myself watching this again or with someone else or recommending it. But I kind of see all those things happening at some point.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, Daniel.
So this movie, for me, anyone who's been listening for a while, this movie ended up coming straight up my alley with no idea what I was getting myself into. This thing ended up being the type of movie that I am going to and am currently obsessed with. This movie, the documentary angle at the very beginning, I think that you're right. I think it was kind of shoehorned in there. And I think it was created as this way to set it apart from just being like, oh, we found this old movie from the 70s, you know, and it separates it from that found footage type film. But is this movie scary? It's yes. Yes, this movie is very scary. However, scary wouldn't be my go-to word to describe this movie. This movie's disturbing. This movie's unsettling.
Yeah.
This movie takes itself so freakishly seriously that it's you, even if you wanted to joke about like how serious and intense this movie is, you couldn't, because it's fully aware of how serious and intense it is. I do like the documentary setup at the beginning because it kind of lays this groundwork for you being ready for these weird things. It's not uncommon to watch a scary movie and there be the random scene kind of spliced in or things get bizarre. So what they did with the documentary angle was they got you ready for that. And I love that they dropped references to all the other films that when you watch them, you die. You know, they reference Ringu and John Carpenter's Cigarette Burns, which if you've never seen is I think it's from like Showtime Masters of Horror or something like that. Incredible. It was hyped that they talked about Cigarette Burns. But they set all that up and they tell you all these stories and they tell you that it's going to mess with your head and all this. And I think that serves to keep you on edge immediately. And you're so focused on watching for these things that I can't wait to watch this again and find out if there were times where I was actually seeing things or if my brain was so attuned to be looking for things that I was seeing things that weren't there.
Yeah.
I think that this movie is scary. I do. I think that there's a tone to this movie that's bothersome, and not in a bad way, just in a way that you're never allowed to relax, and not even that you're like tense the whole time. It's not like it's just what's going on. and,
Yeah.
and not in a bad way. But I finished this movie about 24 hours ago, and this movie has been this is the film equivalent of an earworm for me. I've been able to think of nothing but this movie. I have poured over this thing. I've pulled out books. I've been reading. I like the documentary part at the end because they give you just enough to where you can either decide, okay, I get that, and I'm good with why that stuff went, or they go, here's a couple more seeds to help with your research. That's why I ended up loving the end, because I was like, oh, this saved me so much trouble as opposed to just like trying to Google image search this sigil, right? They gave me what it was.
Here it is.
Yeah. But then I was able to take that and read so much more about it. And, whereas with Hereditary, I was kind of left on the fence. I found the stuff, but it was a lot harder.
Well, of course you did.
Yeah. With this, it was the initial kernels weren't hard to find, but what I found myself doing today was playing this movie on my phone and like screenshotting and like frame by framing and trying to get all of these different things that just appear for just a second, just as a reference, just for as we get into this episode for the listener, things I've done today. Watch this movie on my phone with no volume just for screenshots. Translated Latin in Google Translate, research sigils and magic circles, combed and pored over Lesser Key of Solomon, looking for some of these sigils that aren't explicitly described. I've been going insane, but I've had so much fun. No, you haven't,
man. This is your wheelhouse, dude.
You're right. I haven't been going insane. I've loved every minute of this.
Yeah.
But I think that this movie establishes this weird real world aesthetic so early that it leaves you, when you watch The Ring, even though they show you the movie, you're never left thinking, oh, I'm going to die in 7 days, because they established that The Ring is a movie that exists in the world of Ringu. Mm-hmm. And so the people in the universe of Ringu watch The Ring and they die in 7 days. This establishes that Antrum exists in our world. This is our world. Here's real filmmakers going by their real names, looking like they're shooting from the hip about this. And now we're going to show it to you, including a legal disclaimer that's like, hey, if you keep watching and you die, that's not on us. They do so much to make this real world that I loved that. The documentary part at the end, talking about binaural beats, a lot of that's very real research. And there are apps you can download on your phone that you're supposed to be able to put on headphones and listen, and it's supposed to make you feel high and stuff like that if you listen to these certain beats. It was they did a lot, but I really appreciated the way that they kind of went about it. And so, like we've talked about here, this movie's presented in 3 parts. We open with this documentary where they explain what Antrum is. Then they show us the actual film Antrum. Then they give us this epilogue kind of documentary as credits roll. So what it's really striving to do is push you as a watcher beyond what you might necessarily be looking for in a horror movie. So like, did all of these 3 things work together? And I'm going to put you on the spot here because I want to know, did you think it was good? Was it just found footage nonsense?
I don't think it was found footage nonsense. I think that they tried to do something new with the found footage genre. And I think generally it works. It works because it's effective at making you feel weird.
Yeah.
Like I occasionally felt like I had a sinking feeling in my stomach, you know, or felt like I just needed to move, you know, because I had something that was bugging me.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
But as far as it being good, I don't think I would call it good. Antrum, the film within the film, I don't think is a particularly good movie. But it is effective at scaring you.
Right.
The documentary pieces that are the bookends are effective as documentaries,
Right.
but I don't think that it vibes with everything else that's there. But it does work in the sense that, like, now you got a movie, you know, because
Okay.
and it was a new idea. Like, I really appreciate that this isn't just a, you know, I mean, not that this is happening much these days, you know, but it's not a Friday the 13th part 9, you
Right.
know, and nothing wrong with Jason Goes to Hell, but like, fuck, maybe it's time to do something new. And I say that about my favorite horror franchise here, right?
Right.
So it's new, it's fresh, and I think for the most part it works. I don't think that um it's good, but that doesn't stop it from being interesting. And I think that was one of the things that really got me here is I was interested the whole time. Like, where's it going to go next? Because the way that it starts with, you know, the dog being put down, the mother speaking to the boy about how the dog's not going to heaven, the dog's going to hell. Like, that in itself to me was like really odd. You know,
Yes.
like, what parent tells their child that needs to be consoled, like, no, the dog's going to hell, you know? Like, that's Don Bluth promised us that all dogs go to heaven,
He did.
you know?
They even had the poster in the veterinarian's office.
Did they?
Yes.
I didn't notice.
When they're putting the dog down, there's literally and like, it's not the movie poster, but it's just like a framed picture that says all dogs go to heaven.
I used to watch that all the time as a
Oh
kid.
yeah. It's creepy.
Yeah. You know, so I think it even like it starts in a weird way. So like the premise, you have to accept it, and to me it's not an acceptable premise. Like, it's not a realistic premise for a movie. But if you can say, okay, well, that is the premise, and move on from that, then again, the rest of the movie, his sisters plan to have him accept that they've saved the soul of the dog by going into a suicide forest
Yes.
and digging a portal to hell. Like, to me, it's nonsense, but it's okay that it's nonsense because the purpose of this movie was never to make sense.
There we
The
go.
purpose of this movie was to scare you. And so, like, I'm really conflicted here because I don't think that makes a good movie. I or at least it doesn't make a good movie for me.
Fair.
I should say that. But it did freak me out. It did make me feel uneasy and disturbed. And like, when the kids stumble upon the guy that's gonna harikiri himself, you know, like
Oh
that.
yeah,
That was like a whoa, what the fuck? Like, I had forgotten that it was a suicide forest,
yeah.
you know, because they were so secluded by themselves, you know, and then they see the corpse that's rotting by their campsite later, you know. So, like, there's these little things that happen. I don't know. Did I like it? I don't know. Was it enjoyable? Sure. Did it freak me out? Yeah. My son always asks if he can watch the Shiver movie with me,
Right.
and I initially told him no. I think he can handle this. Like,
Yeah.
it's a weird thing because, like, it is fucked up. Like, I would definitely categorize this as fucked up. But like, Hostel is also fucked up, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't let him watch Hostel, you know. But I might consider this. It's weird because it's the kind of thing where I think everyone can watch this and be freaked out by it because they're using film language to mess with you. And
Yeah.
I think that the story doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So it doesn't matter how good that story was.
You know, you mentioned earlier that this movie is experimental filmmaking.
Mhm.
This is a movie that was trying to, last week watching X, which had a very defined story. We talked a lot about the story between the story. This is a movie that solely exists between the movie, right?
Right.
The parts of this movie that are so odd and so bizarre all take place outside of this idea of finding. So in case if you've seen the movie and missed it, or if you're just listening and you haven't watched the movie yet, Antrum is the spot where Lucifer falls to earth and falls through the earth into hell.
Mhm.
That's what the Antrum is. It's the entrance to hell. And so that's why they're looking for this, because they're going to save their dog's soul, not the actual dog, just its soul. They're very specific about that. And
she wants to have her brother believe that they've saved the dog's soul.
Right, exactly. And which is another spectacular moment in storytelling in the middle there. But so they go to the suicide forest, they're digging this hole, they're doing all of this, and they've got what is presented to us as a grimoire of how to get to hell, and it's got these protection prayers and how you build a protection circle, and they do all these weird things. They've got their pentagram circle, and they've got 5 different religious pieces from religions all around the world at the points, and they're doing all of these weird things that seem, when you're watching it, they seem like this very teenager type approach at what Satanism kind of is. But there's so much happening while all of this is going on. Like you said, when you start saying the pieces out loud, it sounds insane. They're going to a suicide forest to dig a hole to hell to save the soul of their dog. And it's cheerful. You know, they're weird about it. Where this movie starts to pay off is not necessarily in story of Antrum, the film, in the film. Where this movie plays off is this idea that's presented to us as a whole, the story of this being a film that was specifically designed to screw with the human psyche. This is a film that people have added scenes into, and it's become more than it ever was. The entire story of Antrum, the deadliest film ever made, I think is really good. And I think that that
idea that I'm sorry to interrupt, but that idea that they don't know who made this,
right?
That, you know, the belief is that it was the devil who created this. Like, what great marketing, you know?
Like that. I think that's why those documentary pieces are so vital, because if you just look at the film Antrum and you don't get the lead up to why the sound is weird sometimes and what are these etchings and what is happening, then you get a really nonsensical story that just berates you at these things. But when you get those documentary pieces and you look at the entirety of the 94 minutes of this, then you're watching this knowing that they're trying to screw with you. And then the story becomes, is it going to screw with me? The story doesn't become this brother-sister in the suicide forest thing. The story becomes, can I finish Antrum? Am I going to survive if I watch Antrum? Is it going to screw with my head when I see it? That's the story that I'm fascinated by. I'm fascinated by the mythology that is Antrum, that was built within this movie. And I'm viewing all of that as the story when I say that I think the story that was presented here was really, really good. And I do agree with you about the fact that this is going to be super, super niche, right? Like I just happen to be the target audience for this movie, and I understand that. And I just full disclosure, I texted Dave earlier and I was like, I may come unhinged like watching this, because I felt right on the verge of a breakdown like all day going through all of this. But I think that when we look at everything, this idea that this film killed people, or that people who watched this film died, when we look at the idea of people have altered this film. Nobody even knows who made it, but things have been added, scenes added, these etchings added. They say at the end that a lot of these sigils are scratched onto plastic that was then perfectly attached over frames of the movie. So you know that that wasn't part of the original, but they line up so beautifully with things that are happening. But then at the end, they go, yeah, let us tell you about some of this stuff to further the idea that this film in the movie is become a sentient, living, breathing thing. It's
Right.
It's so weird. It's so weird. And I loved it so much. As we get into talking about more stuff, I think they did great things with some weird camera tricks that were on one hand really subtle, but on the other hand so over the top, because you could tell they were made using like old school film techniques. There are parts in this movie that look like they're straight out of like Trip to the Moon, you know?
Yeah.
And so you're like, okay, yeah, no, like this is low budget. Somebody who barely knew what they were doing made this. And just the mythology, the idea of Antrum as a whole, I think is a fascinating story.
You know what I think about this movie is, and this occurred to me while you were talking. I can't remember what it was that you said that reminded me of this, but back in the early days of Reddit, I got really into creepypastas.
Yeah.
Or creepypasta, as it's supposed to be pronounced. And to me, this is like an extension of those creepypastas because
that's exactly what it is.
Because it's like, you know, hey, here's a creepy story. All it is just we want to freak you out. And then someone takes that story and they turn it into something else. And it keeps evolving until you get the most fucked up version of that story eventually.
Yes.
And I think that's kind of what this is. I remember specifically, I don't know if you ever saw the supposed cursed Mickey Mouse cartoon.
I've seen the cursed
Suicide
Mickey Mouse. Yes. Suicide Mouse. I've seen that one. It ranks up there as one of the best ones.
Yeah. And it's weird.
Yes.
You know, and that's kind of the feeling I had watching this. Is it's like it's just fucking weird, and in the best way possible. It's weird.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember Cursed Mickey Mouse, and I think it was called Ben Drowned, about this kid.
Ben Drowned, yeah,
Ben
with
Drowned,
The Legend of Zelda.
Yes. Yeah. Like two of the best ever. Like Ben Drowned, like even with the like got to the point where people were hacking cartridges of Ocarina of Time to make these things play out oddly. Like, you're absolutely right. This is a creepypasta.
Yeah, absolutely. So the next section, I love what you titled this. On a Mission to Hell, right?
Yeah.
So the cast consisted pretty much of two people. You know, we had a mother, we had two cannibals, and we had a random Japanese man who was going to commit suicide. But really, I mean, that's the core of this movie. Like 80% of this movie is just them, right? So we have the brother, we have the sister. I guess, as you've written here, I mean, you're right. It's a wholesome adventure, you know, because her purpose really is a wholesome one, right? They're gonna rescue the dog's soul from the bowels of hell, you know. And I didn't even really understand what it was that they were doing until she placed the collar.
Yeah.
Right. Then I was like, oh, I get it. Now I know what you're doing. There's a lot of weight on just two child actors here. Do you think that they pull it off?
I really think that they do. And I think that this comes down to a dynamic that I feel like we just keep coming back to, because it's so easy to do wrong as somebody who has siblings. And that is this idea of how a brother and sister interact. Mm-hmm. When we look at how Nathan and Orly are engaging with each other in this film, it very much does feel like a big sister and a little brother, and that she's trying to do what's best for him. and he needs closure. He's having these nightmares ever since the dog gets put down because the mom tells him his dog's not going to heaven. I just, like, as soon as that happened, I was like, all right, I don't know I have no idea what to expect anymore. Right? And so you get this boy who believes everything his sister says. And, you know, we talked about it a little bit, and we're going to get into it more as we get into some of the thematic parts of this movie. But about halfway through, when shit is really hitting the fan and has gone awry, you find out that this grimoire that the sister has was fake, and she made the whole thing up. But we're seeing things that don't make sense if they're not actually digging their way to hell. But when you get this idea of a little brother who can so easily and blindly follow what his big sister says, he obviously idolizes her, and what she says, that's law. What she says goes. Write it in stone. That's the way it happens. To the point that, yes, she created a tome of how to get to hell and how to survive visiting hell. And he's just like, oh, you got it from Ike? Yeah, cool. Yeah, good. Yeah, I believe you. And they're going with this. But I think that she did a great job of, in the beginning, she was very wholesome about everything. Before we knew that it was fake, she was very much out to protect her brother at all costs, and everything that she did in creating this story, we eventually find out, as well as while they were there, is to keep him safe. And when shit goes sideways and she can't keep him safe anymore, then we get that genuine panicked freak out of, this is my fault. I cannot protect him. And that's the one thing I was supposed to do out here, was protect him. And she makes that turn so well. That when that switch flips and she goes from lighthearted older sister, let's have some fun, to no, everything's wrong. This isn't how this was supposed to go. We need to survive. She dominates that. It's incredible. There are some great little moments where earlier, when she's still being a wholesome and she wants him to brush his teeth and he wants her to wash his feet. He wants her to wash her feet. That's the type of shit that brothers and sisters argue about, especially if you're sharing a tent or a room. Yeah. Those are the exact things that you're going to argue about. You're going to find something that stinks about the other one, right? You're going to call them out on it.
Yeah.
Those things were so good. And she, I think, did a much better job of portraying terror than he did, because he always seemed oddly at home with everything.
Yeah.
And so it's not to say she did a better job with portraying terror as much as it is to say he understood the assignment of, this kid believes all this and he gets it. And so he doesn't see anything to be afraid of, because he built his protection circle. He said his protection prayer. What should he be scared of? He doesn't view any of this as scary necessarily until things are getting really, really weird. And I think that
until she tells him that it's scary.
Yeah. And yeah, when she tells him, that you should be scared now. But then even then, like, this kid gets tossed in an oven shaped like Baphomet. And like, by the time he gets out and gets away, then he's just like, all right, I'm okay now.
Yeah. He's just covered in soot and smoke. Right. And he's like,
but it's because when he finds that dog and he takes that dog out of the trap, I conceptualize that as him seeing his dog in this, it was a Malamute or something, but seeing his dog in that dog. And when he took that dog's leg out of the trap, he just released his dog's soul. To him, to Nathan, the dog in the trap was his dog's soul. And when he took that trap off, mission accomplished. Let's head home. There's nothing left to be scared of. Whereas Orly is still losing her mind because she can't find her brother. There's cannibals after her. And she's hearing all these freaky noises, and nothing is making sense to her. I think that they both portrayed exactly how I think a child that age would act in this situation. And that's all I could really ask of them.
Man, I have to agree. I think for the couple of shortcomings that this movie has, this is not one of them. I do think that um the technical side of this is quite good.
Yeah.
The acting is good. The direction, I think, is good in that it is intentionally bad.
Right.
Because I don't think that, like I said, they ever intended to make a good movie. They just intended to make a scary movie. And mission accomplished.
Yep.
Both Nathan and Orly do a fantastic job at selling it. And I think that you needed to have that happen. There needed to be some sort of like authenticity to their reactions, because otherwise I'm sucked out of the moment.
Right.
And I'm no longer scared for them or for myself, because all I'm doing is focusing on the bad acting. So I don't know that the acting is stellar, but the acting is good enough
Right.
to not have me notice it. And I think that that's a weird balancing act to kind of keep in your mind as both an actor and a director, is, how do I not make this performance stand out? Because what I want to do is keep you in the moment.
Right.
I don't want you to notice how good my acting is, because I do think that the actress that played Orly,
Nicole Tompkins.
Nicole Tompkins, thank you. I think that there's a really great actress in her.
Yeah.
Because there were a couple of moments where I actually noticed the acting, particularly at the end, like when the credits roll and then she's back.
Yes. That's so weird. So weird.
It was weird, and like, to me, it didn't seem like an MCU post-credit scene.
Yeah.
It was like oh, by the way, we just edited the credits to be before this scene.
Right. Exactly.
Weird. So, or maybe it was like cut from the movie and then added back in by someone, who knows. And that's one of the things I really do like about this movie, is that, like, who knows and who the fuck cares either. To me, they really do a great job, that and the cannibals as well do a really great job of being believable cannibals. And I think that's all they need to be, is believable. And I have nothing bad to say about this. Like, it's just, it was right for what it was.
Especially because if the idea of this movie is that this movie is an experience, then the acting needs to be, like you said, just good enough that you're interested, but not so good that you stop experiencing the weird noise, the sigils that are etched into the film, the things like that. You never stop, because the acting and the special effects aren't just so amazing that you just get engrossed in it all. You're able to keep remembering that this film is an experience, and that's what it's supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that moves us into what I think is maybe the most interesting aspect of this movie, which is its meta qualities, right? So what the movie is, from the outside, is a documentary about a movie, right? And the movie within the movie is the frontispiece.
Yes.
So it kind of has this really heady, lofty idea going on here. Meta is never easy to do.
Right.
And it's definitely never easy to do right.
Yeah,
I think lots of different people have tried the meta thing, and it doesn't always work. So the nature of belief and the power of belief systems have on us is very much present here, right? Did this hit the way that the filmmakers intended it to hit? Did it have that power behind it, or was it just another exercise in filmmaking?
So we're presented early on with this idea of seeing filmmakers say, can a movie kill you? Can a movie have that power over you? And we get some of these filmmakers talking about, well, they built theaters next to hospitals because people can watch movies and they feel better. So could it do the opposite? Could a movie kill you? So you start off with that idea of building this belief that maybe a movie could kill you. And so you're immediately presented with this idea of things have the power that you give them. And that's, I think, one of the biggest things that runs through this movie is this idea that something, it has the power that you allow it to have. And this is an as above and as below, so above type thing, where you create your own reality, right? Like you said, it gets real heady when you start talking about this concept. So then you get into the movie and you've got them digging this hole to hell, and things are obviously getting super weird. There's one scene where they're up on a hill talking, and in the background there's this really light outline of this face of Azagoth, right? And Astaroth back there. And so you've got this idea that these things are really happening, but then you find out that the sister made it all up. But these things are definitely happening, and they're happening exactly like she said that they would happen. They're happening in the way in this book that she created. And so then, do we have the ability to believe something so strongly that it becomes reality? Is it this child's belief is her little brother's belief in what she's saying that is making these things happen? Or is it the fact that she believes she made it up, but it's because it was reality? That all gets so weird. There's a moment in this where she says, I made it all up. And it happens at almost the dead center point of the movie. Like I went back and I checked this today, and at almost exactly the middle point of the movie, we get the sound gets completely stripped out. And all we have is a close up of the sister as she says the words, I made it up. I made it all up. And within the movie, that's telling us, I made this up. This isn't happening. I don't know what's happening, but it's not what I'm saying. But that's also the filmmakers coming at us and saying, guys, we made this up. Like this is fake, which is amazing, because I went and I found some people who wrote about when this was premiered at a film festival, and the creators did a Q&A afterwards, and they did the entire Q&A without breaking character. They did the whole thing presented like this is a real documentary about a real film that we found and we're making. And at one point, like somebody from the media stood up in the audience and screamed at the top of their lungs, stop bullshitting your audience. And they took it all in stride, and they never broke character, which is fascinating when you're presented with this midpoint in the movie where they go out of their way. Like I said, they even strip away the sound. So you're forced to look at this movie as being fake. It gets into these really weird moments that work on a lot of levels. You said meta is hard to do, and you're not wrong. And I think that this movie does meta very, very well, to the extreme of this movie is, and this is, I don't use like pretentious filmmaking words much, but this movie it's a deconstructivist horror experience. This movie is breaking down a horror movie into just, can we scare you, and what elements are we going to put together to make that happen outside of telling some amazing story. There are some really great things in here, when we're talking about the meta aspect of this and the stuff that's added afterwards. And we're going to try something new here. So if you're watching live, check this out. So what you may have noticed throughout the movie is there are parts where for just a couple frames, there are some words that appear on the screen. I scrubbed this movie today, and let me take it back. I didn't have to, because it's the very first time I noticed it. I was like, I don't have time to look that up. It was obviously Latin, and I wrote down all the timestamps. So I went through today, and I found I made some screenshots of these parts in the movie with this Latin. And when you want to look at how meta this really gets, when you start to look at these, so if you're watching us live or if you watch us on YouTube, enjoy. I'm going to try to pull these up because my Latin is terrible. So the very first time that you see this, it looks like this, and it's the two of them walking. They still haven't gotten there, and it says something to the extent of abyssus abyssum evocat, which is, from what I could tell from looking at translations today, it essentially means hell calls to hell, or hell becomes hell, which is, if you look for it, you're going to find it. There's a hell there. What that hell is, that's up to you, but you're going to find it. And so they go looking for hell, even though it's on a joke, or it's not a joke, even though it's a mission of closure. But even theoretically, going to look for hell presents you with an opportunity to find hell, which shows us why things are going weird, which is why I guess they went to a suicide forest. Right. So the next one here is a shot of the woods. And it's Facilis de Senes Averno, which this one was really easy to translate. Thank you, Google. This one means the descent to hell is easy. And that's one that you look at that and you find translations of that everywhere. That's one that's used by preachers to talk about, talk about the primrose path and how easy it is to go down that. But also just how, again, it goes with that first one, how easy it is to find hell if you're looking for it. And there's a couple more that I'll get into when we get to the next part. But this movie created such a weird universe, and it created such the themes that were presented to us here. And it's funny because I felt like this one was a lot weirder, but I felt like I picked this one up easier than X. When you and Adam were explaining shit to me about X last week, I was like, oh damn, yeah. Like this one, I was like, oh yeah, I fucking get it. I get it, right? This got into that really weird meta space, including the when there's almost like these chapters in the movie where and they've all got names. Nephestus, which literally basically translates to the opposite of holy. The next layer is Maleficus, which is just wicked. The third one is demonium, which I couldn't find an actual translation for. So I'm assuming based on the
demonic,
fact that actually, that was my first thought, was that it would be demonic. But when I went back and I looked, this happens right before they meet the cannibals. So I wonder if this is actually ripped from Pandemonium. Because this chapter of the book starts right before shit gets crazy. So is it demonic? Because we're meeting these cannibals who, by the way, they're not completely out of place. They're demons. And
I assumed,
yes, but the reason that you don't have to assume, when they're flipping through the book at one point and it shows demons in the book putting on flesh suits.
Yeah.
The flesh suits they put on are those two guys.
Yeah, that's right.
The woods. They're the exact people that are in the woods.
Good catch.
Thank you. And so right before shit gets crazy, we get this chapter called Demonium, which, like I said, maybe it's Pandemonium, maybe it's demonic. But then you get Incartius Metus, which is fear the flesh. And that's once they've met people who are trying to kill them and possibly eat them. We know they at least want to cook them. And then the last one is Abyssus, which is just hell or the pit or however you want to translate that.
Emptiness.
But each one of those things kind of fell in line with what was happening in the movie. But they weren't like, it wasn't presented like she just got to that chapter in the book. It was presented with like this weird demon hand flipping pages, right? So again, we're so meta that the movie in the movie is being presented to you as a movie,
What I found really interesting about that was that there was no hand moving it at first.
Right.
It was almost like I don't know if you remember the framing piece for a lot of those early Disney animated movies. It was
Yeah.
the storybook, and it was like, stop motion animation as the page just kind of flopped over, and it was kind of like that until the Demon Hand comes out, which I assume is Ike.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Right, Ike or Astaroth, which
I assumed Astaroth was Ike.
correct, yeah, because because she says she made it all up, she made Ike up, but then Nathan says, "But I met Ike," and we get this really cool flashback of him meeting some weird shadowy figure with a claw for a hand behind a dumpster.
Yeah.
And we get this really cool silhouette, but then of a I assume a gross face. It was a gross outline. But again, for the people watching live, here you go. When we see his face, they perfectly put this right on top of his face, like where a face would be in this silhouette. And the movie very graciously told us at the end that that's the sigil of Astaroth. So it also then proceeded to then put that sigil on Nathan's face, which I assumed indicated that he had then been marked by Astaroth.
Interesting. What I liked most about the meta quality of this movie is that all the little tricks of the trade, or not all of them, but a lot of the tricks that they used, they end up commenting on. So I don't know that this movie ends up being as effective as it is without the framing of the documentary, which is
Right.
why I say it doesn't necessarily work, but it does. It works enough, so the setup of this movie has killed, or you can
Yes.
decide whether the movie is killed. Here's a couple of cases of people that have died immediately after watching the movie.
Right.
That kind of puts you in the frame of mind where it's like, okay, I'm expecting this to be weird. I'm expecting it to be evil, So then you're looking for the stuff that's in there, like them looking for hell, the portal to hell. And then at the end, after all of their little tricks have definitely fucked with you, because they have, anyone who watches this movie and says, "Oh yeah, it didn't do anything to me," shut the fuck up, man.
Shut up.
They tell you how they did this shit.
Yeah.
That's super cool to me. I love that sort of stuff, because I love watching, and it's pretty clear if you've ever seen any episode of our show or heard any episode of our show, I'm always talking about the behind the scenes stuff. I'm always talking about the extras that are included on Blu-rays. I love that shit because it's a peek into the creators' minds, and they did this inside of the movie.
Right.
So that's incredibly cool. I think it's incredibly effective at reminding the audience what this is, because if you just happen to stumble upon this, I saw this on Tubi. Right. If I would have just happened to stumble upon this and say, wow, this looks kind of cool, right? There's a Baphomet oven with a giant cock on it.
Yeah.
Watch
yeah.
this thing,
if you're watching
right?
us live, I mean, look at this thing.
It's
right.
It's right there. It's right there. You can't miss it. So we're both kind of just poking the Baphomet cock. Boink, boink. So like it's, you don't know what this is, and they lay it all out there for you, because if you watch Halloween, you know what the movie is 5 minutes in.
Right.
If you watch Psycho, you know what it is 5 minutes in. And you don't necessarily know that if you only watch Antrum, not Antrum, the deadliest film ever made.
Right.
So like it kind of has to be meta for it to work. And because it's, I think, an exercise in experimenting with horror, it works, man. I mean, it works as a practice in that.
Yeah. They did a lot of weird. There's one really cool thing here that I don't know. It's storyline. It's kind of meta. There's a little bit of everything, but so this movie, Antrum, ends with Nathan is walking through the forest He's happy-go-lucky. As far as he's concerned, he's out of hell. He's saved his dog's soul. He's good to go. All the while, his sister has just shot 2 demons, and is now hiding out in the tent, has no idea where her brother is, and she just hears a chain being dragged, which they'd heard before, and it had freaked them out. So she's sitting in the tent with a gun and pointing it at the entrance to the tent, and she's hysterical. There is no coming back from this. She doesn't know where Nathan is. And we know Nathan is getting right outside the tent. She's right inside with this gun pointed at it. And we get this extreme close up of the barrel of this gun. And then it ends. So you're left with this idea of, did she shoot Nathan and they didn't show it? Or did she not shoot Nathan? And that was plaguing me. That was driving me insane. So I went back through this movie as soon as I finished it, and I was like, well, that's obviously a revolver. So it's a 6-shooter. So I went back through and I counted, and she fires the gun 5 times in the movie. So your initial thought is, oh my God, so there's a bullet left, and she probably did shoot Nathan. But then you stop and you think about it and you go, but they found that gun in a suicide forest. So a gun in a suicide forest would have been used to commit suicide. And now there's a 6th bullet in play. And so if nothing else, it made it harder for me to decide.
I had not considered that, because I know that there's this, is it Nathan or is it not Nathan? In my mind, it can only be him.
Correct.
Because eventually he's going to wander back to the camp.
Yes.
He's a little boy. He has no way of getting home. He's going to go to where's familiar. And so I assumed that she shot him, which to me was like the cherry on top of a shit sundae. It's like, you had this idea, who the fuck has this idea?
Yeah.
You had this idea, and now you have paid the price because you went looking for hell. And now you're in your own personal hell.
Yeah. And so, like I said, I thought I was on to something when I was going to count these bullets and then only counted 5. But like I said, we don't know if that gun was just dropped there or if somebody did commit suicide with it. So we still don't know if there's a 6th bullet in there. But they did very expertly make sure we know that there's a possibility that there is a bullet left in that gun, which fits this idea of the movie being as realistic as possible, right? That there were 5 shots fired. We can tell that it's a 6-shooter. Stuff like that, like those little things are what has made this movie stay with me as much as it has. And so I entitled this next section, "Oh no, Daniel's going to talk occult," isn't he? And so I'm going to intro this one so you get a chance to talk about anything first before I take you guys into the depths that is stream of consciousness as it exists for me. So Antrum is full of hidden pieces. It's full of surprises. The epilogue wraps up a lot of these things that we find in the movie. But do you feel that this added to the movie, or did it distract you from when you were trying to watch it? I mean, was there anything else that you noticed that they didn't talk about in the epilogue?
No, I think that the movie kind of needed that because they set it up very early. This movie is rumored to have been created and submitted to all these festivals by the devil as a way to further his reign on earth, or whatever the purpose is. I don't know how devils think, right? So with that comes the territory of occult language and runic language and sigils and all this stuff that we discussed during Hereditary,
right?
Because it's the way that we understand in pop culture that the devil exists and that people are concerning themselves with the devil and the demonic. So to me, as soon as I saw scratching on the film negative. And I'm like, oh, there's words there. I didn't stop either. I was like, I just want to watch this movie once through before I stop and I, start looking this shit up. And then I was about to start looking it up, and I was like, Daniel's going to do it, and he's going to do it so much better than I am. So I'm like, fuck. Okay, so there is a lot of occult stuff here. The beauty of it is none of it needs to work.
Correct.
In the real sense, quote unquote real sense. I use real hard air quotes there. But none of it needs to work in the real sense, because all it needs to do is to give you the impression that someone who's really interested in the occult had their hands on this film.
Yes.
Or many people who had an interest in the occult had their hands on this movie. One of the things that I think is most interesting here is like the snuff aspect to this movie. Yes. Because the shit that's spliced into here is really interesting, because there's a story to that too. I would like to see that played out by itself. Now there's seconds of that film there. There's not really that much, but that's a whole other aspect of the occult, where we are going to torture you and we're going to kill you for the benefit of what we believe in.
Right.
And, so that sort of, human sacrifice that is quote unquote real human sacrifice in this real movie, which was made as a film, so it's fictional. There's all this, meta stuff that's going on in here where you have to think, at one point as the viewer, you're thinking, is there really something to this?
Right.
And that's I think one of the coolest things about this movie is, ultimately I am one of the most agnostic people you'll ever find. I don't believe in much. So when something makes me question, like, oh, but did something go into this?
Right.
Is there something here? Like, to me, that's incredible, and that happened here where I had to stop and remind myself, you don't believe in anything.
I had to remind myself.
Yeah, I had to remind myself, you don't believe in anything. I had to remind myself, you barely believe in yourself. You're probably sucked into some sort of matrix, right? So, and I used to have Loot Fright, like Loot Crate's horror thing, and I think I technically do, but they haven't done anything in a while. They once had an occult box that they sent out, and there was this really cool Sabrina the Teenage Witch mug. There was some other stuff, and one of the things that came with it was a little statue of Baphomet. Right. And I initially didn't really think much of it. I kind of just I opened the box, I threw the statue on my desk. I usually have some sort of horror something on my desk. Like currently it's this Dawn of the Dead bust. Nice. I swap shit out, that way I've got something going on in front of me that that reminds me, as they say in Conan the Barbarian, what is best in life?
What is
right? So I ended up having this conversation with my wife where she was like, "You gonna keep that statue of Baphomet in here?" And I was like, "Yeah, why? What's the deal? It's not real, And she was like, "Yeah, but why play with fire if you know that it's hot?" I'm like, "But is it hot?" And she's like, "Do you want to find out?" I was like, "You know what? You're right." And so I took the statue of Baphomet and I tossed it. And that's the kind of thing that happens in this movie where it's like, it's a movie, but
right.
And that question, but that to me, that's one of the coolest things about this. And I'm going to stop there because I know you've got so much to say about this.
So the occult in this is presented a lot. I'm going to segue perfectly from what you're talking about, because it's about the power of belief and everything having the power that we put into it. There's overt symbolism all throughout this. The not the least of which being the giant bedict Baphomet that we were talking about.
Thank you for using bedict.
Hey, I tried. And so there's a lot here, and much like Hereditary, it was presented in a way that you could tell that the research was done, that this was presented accurately. Start with Astaroth or Astaroth. Excuse me. I keep wanting to put a G in there. Astaroth is.
I always want to say Azeroth, like Raven,
like Raven,
Azeroth,
Metreon,
Zinthos.
Yeah. Astaroth is actually a demon presented, written about in the Lesser Key of Solomon by Aleister Crowley. Was Aleister Crowley a dickhead? Absolutely. Is his writing, canonical to a lot of people? Yeah, sure. But what's great about the fact that they went with Astaroth is that Astaroth is presented as being extremely wise. He's considered a duke of demons. Like he's a high level, like Beelzebub, Lucifer level demon, ruling 40 legions of spirits, according to the Lesser Key of Solomon. He's another one, much like Payman in Hereditary, where when you ask him questions, he's going to give you truthful answers, past, present, or future. He is bound to give you truthful answers. So the idea of it being the sigil of Astaroth that's presented with throughout this movie is interesting, because what we're presented with is a lie that becomes the truth, or truth that was presented as a lie. But either way, what we're given is truth. It's presented as truth constantly through the documentary angle, through the idea that even though the sister says she made this up, these things happen. So very, very tactful to go with Astaroth in that one. Also, just to read to you from the Lesser Keys of Solomon, and I just want you to hear the description that's given, because he sounds incredible. So the form of Astaroth is, and I quote, "the form of a hurtful angel riding on an infernal beast like a dragon and carrying in his right hand a viper." It's metal as fuck.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, that hasn't been the cover of a metal album.
Yeah,
is a fucking travesty. And if it has, someone needs to tell me what album this is so I can listen to it.
Yeah. So very great idea to go with that. And what's even, and so as you get more into this, I do have the rest of that Latin. So here, the third time, we get the one that looks like this. And it was backwards on the film. That is a screenshot from the movie. And I'm not even going to try to read it, between the fact that it's backwards and it's in
you
Latin.
want me to try?
Yeah, go for it.
Cave. So no, it's Latin. So cave ab homine muis. No. Unius. Okay, so cave ab homine uminus libri.
Yeah, I do know.
So that's book.
That's book.
United book, one book.
One book.
Man's one book. Something so man's close. One book. Yeah.
You're all over it. That translates to fear the man who knows only one book.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah. So I mean, you were there, like you were breaking it down. So you get this idea of, should you be afraid of Nathan because everything he knows is from this one book that his sister created? Whether she created, by the way, some of her, you're talking about metal as fuck, some of her pictures in that book.
Oh,
man,
yeah.
Like the flip book of the demon crawling out of the hole, some of the weird stuff that's on the Welcome to Hell page. Man, if she did all that, that picture of Cerberus she did, I can forget about it.
Hell yeah.
But so is Nathan to be feared because everything he knows is from this one book? Or should we fear for Nathan because he only knows what's in this one book and doesn't know what he's actually gotten himself into? So again, something that you can dig into with that. And then the best one, and what happens to be the fourth one, is right here, which is nihil prestissimus veritate, right? Veritate. I don't do Latin. Which roughly translates to the most precious truth, which then from researching that, I found that's actually part of a longer quote, which is the truth is hidden, but nothing is more precious than the most truth. And so again, this idea of is all of this truth. I feel like I've mentioned this before. I'm a firm believer in the collective unconscious. And so this idea that she created this book, but that it ends up happening. So did she at some point, either through her brother's connection with Astaroth, or just in her fervor to find closure for her brother, did she tap in to some piece of the collective unconscious that revealed to her the most precious truth, which is the things that she put down into this book? And so did she almost autonomously write this, like in is it Insidious, where they talk about auto writing? And
yes, yeah.
Was it that type of thing? Did she kind of tap in and these things just happened, and then she's thinking she's a genius because she created all of this, but what she actually did was find the most precious hidden truth, which is this idea that there you can venture to hell, and it's not hard to get there, and you can make it when you try to go. All of these things keep adding up to such a bizarre take on the on occult imagery, including mythological imagery between Cerberus and what was obviously Karen, right? I mean, like that's obviously Karen the ferryman, because that was a dead body. And then as they go across the river, whatever's in that water is humanesque, much like the river Styx. So you start to blend in mythology, which, you know, I think a lot of times people tend to forget that if you keep tracing the roots of all these different religions and stuff, what you're looking at is tributaries off a much wider river, which is the need for understanding, the need for acceptance, the need for there to be something bigger than yourself, so you have a reason to exist. What this sister, the reason that what was bigger than herself for Orlia, what was bigger than her was the need for her brother to be able to sleep at night, to live a normal life. She was questing after these things, much in the way that all of these people who have created religions were the main ones were questing after just something bigger than them. You go back far enough and it's like, well, they needed a reason to say why the sun rose. They were it's that thirst for knowledge. She had something bigger than herself that she quested for. And was that enough? Was that enough for her to tap in to this idea of the most precious truth? And that's the part of this movie that I'm not over yet. I'm not over this idea that she thinks she made it up, but that it happens that way. I'm not over the fact that these pictures from her book perfectly show up in this suicide forest. I'm not over the fact that I found all sorts of other sigils. By the way, they tell you in the movie that the sigil of Astaroth is located within the movie 170 something times. They tell you that at the very end. But there are other sigils peppered throughout this movie. If you frame by frame scrub the beginning, which for all intents and purposes is just the beginning of a film roll going. If you scrub that frame by frame, those are very intentionally drawn pictures. That is not just film rolling. And what I kept finding,
I got that impression.
What I kept finding was these may be sigils. I obviously I don't own or have read every grimoire out there, right? I own a Lesky of Solomon. This is This is The Black Arts by Richard Cavendish. If you watched our Hereditary episode, you know that I read that one a lot. This is canon. This is biblical to me. I love this book. But what I kept finding was a lot of these things were almost seemed to be like combination sigils, which again lends credence to this idea of somebody after the fact finding the movie and adding stuff into it, adding maybe something that they've created to summon or something like that, to invoke these other sigils being added, and not being anything specific, again gives it this weird raw idea that this is a film that's out there in the wild and is you ever, maybe we've used it on the show before, but do you know what goblin porn is?
No.
Okay. When I was a kid, there were these woods, and out in these woods there was like a tree with a hole in it, and inside that tree there was a gallon-sized Ziploc bag that had a bunch of porno mags in it. And like, you passed on that knowledge to younger kids. Like you never seen boobies? Go out to the tree, right? This and we called it goblin.
Go out to the tree.
Yeah, go out to the tree. There's boobies there. This movie takes on that sort of life, which is everybody who finds it adds their own to it. And some of it may just be, some filmmaker who added something scratched in because they thought it was creepy. And some of it may be somebody else who found it and kind of figured out what they were doing and found a way to add their own touch with something that meant something to them. Again, the power of belief. Even if that sigil is not in a book that I have, like the sigil of Astaroth is, that doesn't mean that doesn't mean something to someone. And depending on how you read into chaos magic, you can create your own sigils, and it's encouraged to create your own sigils, because then you have a personal tie to that sigil, and your ability to manifest what that sigil means to you is increased. So the idea that other people are saying, oh, okay, well, whoever made this movie put these symbols of Astaroth in there, and that's cool, but this is my sigil, and this is what it means, and I have this movie now. So now I am a piece of this movie's history. That's really cool to me. Just a couple other really minor things that I noticed at the very beginning when the boy is dreaming and he's laying. It shows, he's dreaming, but it's showing that he's laying. His hand is perfectly in that little pose right there with his hand on his chest, just like the Baphomet.
Yeah,
they show that scene twice, and his hand is always exactly like the way Baphomet is shown like that. There's the triangle at the end. I put that in with what's known as the Circle of Solomon, again, one that I referenced in Hereditary, because that is an invocation type symbol. And I love that the way they burn it into the screen for the end. I this movie's all I've been able to think about. I kept digging. I found this on Amazon, and I guess Freevee is part of Amazon now or something. And it was like, all right, watch it on Freevee with ads. And I was like, okay, it's $3 to watch without ads. Take my $3. What I am going to do now is go buy another $5, because I go spend another $5 so that I own this, so that I can watch it more than just for 48 hours.
Yeah,
because it's burned into the back of my skull, like that triangle is burned into the film at the end there. And I know that there's going to be more there to find. There's a moment, what I think is honestly the creepiest moment in the whole film, as they're digging the hole, he draws a cross in the dirt, in the hole. Oh, it's a very intentionally drawn cross. It's not just these two lines. Cuts away to his sister, goes back to him, cross is inverted. It's upside down. And that's
when he finds the gun.
Right after he finds the gun. Cross is now upside down, goes back. It's back right way up once he's passed it to his sister. And it's perfect the way it's turned. It's not just like it was scribbled and maybe we caught it from another angle. No, that thing is now upside down. So again, now we're messing with Christian not ideology, but like the pictures.
Iconography.
Iconography. That's the word I was going for. Yes. Now we're messing with Christian iconography. They take the time to use a menorah, a crescent moon, a Buddha, a Hindu goddess. Yeah, there was a Jesus, and then there was like a Hindu goddess. I'm not sure which one. But the one that's like always shown as being Shiva, maybe the one that's blue and has like a lot of arms.
That's Shiva. Yeah.
I believe it was Shiva, but they put all of those things at the 5 points because this isn't about making commentary on one specific religion. This is just getting to whatever the underworld may be. And if it is a physical place, then to get there, you're going to dig a hole. The one last thing I'm going to say is I thought it was incredible that while it was presented to us that they were going to literally dig a hole to hell, and they're digging, they're going, they're getting deeper, and they're passing levels. The boys listening to the dirt. Then they start actually hearing trumpets and stuff like that.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That was insane. But there's a moment where they're out of the hole. Like they decide to take a break and they're just out walking. And Nathan comments, we're in the 4th level.
Yeah. Yeah.
They're not in the hole anymore. This descent into hell is as metaphorical as it is physical, digging down into the hole. The hole was an idea, but it's the fact that they set out on the path to hell that got them there, not because they actually dug the hole. And they're just out walking and they cross into another level because they made the choice to go to hell, and they were going to get there because it turns out it's real easy. Little things like that, I think, are what make if Antrum, the 80 minutes in the middle was all that existed, that stuff would be kind of corny. But because of all of the pomp and circumstance that was built around this, that all adds to the creep factor, adds to this idea of finding the unseen, which is quite literally what occult is defined as. I mean, that's the literal translation. So I just the love that went into this, it touched me on a very personal level. Because I can't say I'm as kind of nihilistic as you are about a lot of things, because I don't know that I put faith in these things, but I do study them, and I do read them a lot, and there's a lot more people who kind of believe in these things happening certain ways than there are me. So like I said, I'm not out here thinking I'm going to summon anything, but again, I have a reverence for the occult and occultism that shine through in this movie, and it warmed my heart.
I can always trust that you are going to, put on your mayoral hat because you're mayor of a cult town.
Ayo. And you get your professor hat when we've got something that has some sort of deep literary theme.
Yeah, and I have it here. It's always with me. There was no need to use it today.
And I get to be mayor of a cult town.
There you
go. So I'm okay with that.
And this leaves us with our rankings. So Daniel, you had some good ideas, but I think the best one that you had was Baphomet ovens.
It's gotta be, right? I mean, it's the image from the movie.
Yeah. I mean, it's right here in front of us. If we're watching, there's Baphomet front and center. So out of a possible 5 Baphomet ovens, how many Baphomet ovens do you give this?
Nobody is questioning this at this point to listen to the way I've talked about this movie. It's all I've thought about. I'm sure that it's all I'm going to think about for at least 48 hours. It was interesting, and it was weird, and it was experimental, and I loved it, and I can't wait to watch it again. And let's face it, again and again. I I think that they definitely, shot for the moon and landed squarely on that son of a bitch. I love everything they did about this, much in the way that, what was it that we did not long ago that so there was something that we 5-starred and said, I've only seen it the once, so I can't gold star it yet. Like that's
Black Phone.
Black Phone. Yeah. That's how I feel about this. And, this is definitely 5 Baphomet ovens for me. I think that it's intriguing. I think that it's lofty and it's heady and like I said, and it's all those pretentious words that we keep using because it deserves that. I am simultaneously fascinated and not surprised by the fact that this thing flew so under the radar.
Yeah,
because I can see this being the world to people like me and meaning absolutely nothing to the general population.
Yeah.
And so while I'm ready to build a cult to this movie and go back to school just to study this particular movie, I can understand why it's not for everybody. But yeah, this thing is a solid 5 Baphomet ovens for me. What about you?
I figured it would be for you. So go with me on this journey. I finished the movie yesterday and I said, I'm not sure where I stand. If I had to rate it right now, I'd probably give it a 3.
Okay.
Then, like you, I thought about it a lot today. Not throughout the whole day, but sporadically. Be like, oh, this was kind of cool. Oh, this other thing was kind of cool. And so I said, you know what? It's effective at what it does, and I think what they set out to do, they accomplished. So I can't give it as low as 3. I was going to give it 3.5, but then while we're talking, I'm like, man, you know what? It is pretty good.
Yes.
It is pretty good. I don't know that I would say it's great.
Right.
As a movie, I don't think that it's great. As an exercise in scaring your audience, this is incredible. For me personally, I can't give this a 5 because to what I love to do is I love to sit down and I love to think about movies. And the way that you just did with the occult and all that stuff, like that's what I like to do with like the critical analysis, the literary analysis. And there's nothing to do that for here.
No.
Because that's not the purpose of this movie. So the fact that I'm going to give this 4 Baphomet ovens to me is it's bewildering because there's very little of what I enjoy in movies in this, and yet it's so effective at what it does that you have to look at it and say, fuck, job well done.
Yeah.
So for me it's 4 Baphomet ovens. If I'm mathing correctly, that's 4.5 Baphomet ovens. And that ain't a score to shake a stick at.
No, there's nothing wrong with that. If you're
not even a stick that's actually a wand that wards demons off,
right? Or you just point it at the worst squirrel animatronic of all time. Like that was the one moment where I was like, I don't even know if this is intentionally bad or if they just couldn't find any stock footage of a squirrel.
I think that it was a callback, and maybe I'm wrong, but I think it was a callback to Evil Dead.
Okay.
With the claymation.
Okay.
Because there's a shot where like the camera's real low to the ground and it comes up to them in the hole shortly before then, which reminds me of like the demon cam that having a brain fart, the director Sam Raimi uses in all those Evil Dead movies. And then of course the very end of Evil Dead is all stop motion.
Right.
So to me it was like, oh, okay, that's a callback to Evil Dead. I don't know if it is. Maybe I'm reading too much into it.
Well, no, I mean this movie, and I know we're done, but this movie was full of nods to. I mean, other than the fact that at the beginning I talked about those real movies, the opening shot of this movie is from a film called Haxan, which is from the 20s or 30s.
Mhm.
And it's generally considered to be the first ever like fictionalized documentary. It's like the original mockumentary.
Mhm.
So there are a lot of nods and callbacks to horror movie history. Again, with there's some reverence put behind those things. So
Yeah.
you could absolutely be right.
Yeah.
All right, so we're sitting firmly at 4.5 Baphomet ovens for Antrum, the deadliest film ever made. If you've listened now and you haven't watched this, I promise you it's still worth watching, because
Yeah. Yeah.
even if we've kind of taken away the surprise of some things, there are some great shots that we couldn't even talk about.
Mhm.
Though we just didn't have time. There are some great camera tricks. There's a lot of really fun stuff. Highly recommend you watch this one. If you are listening and it's your first time and you are wondering where you can find our other episodes, if you head to shiverpod.com, you can find links to everything you need to get to know us well. That will link you to our Instagram, our Facebook, our Twitter, everywhere you can download our podcast. Spotify and iTunes, I know, are the most popular. It will also link you to our YouTube page, because if you're just listening, you missed out on some awesome visuals today.
Yes, you did.
And so check us out. Even if you don't watch us live, you can always go back and watch us on our YouTube channel, which there is also a link to over at shiverpod.com. So go check us out. Follow us on our social media. We try to have some fun with memes and stuff. What's hilarious is I didn't even realize how occult driven this movie was going to be when I made that meme yesterday about me rushing to explain occult references in a movie. I made that meme before I watched this yesterday. So the synchronicity there is disgustingly obvious. And it, again, power of belief, right? I manifested it.
So on behalf of all of us here at Shiver, fight your very